Hello, everyone. Let's talk today about the education in Ukraine. Overall education in Ukraine is one of the hottest topics, and there is ongoing reform that was started in 2014, making a number of tremendous shifts in different sectors of Ukrainian education. And take into consideration that education is one of the most influential in terms of this social changes, economical changes, and also the political changes. It is worth investing into these reforms. But what are the best moves and what are the troubles in the sphere of education? Let's jump in and see. Overall, Ukrainian education is considered to be one of the really skillful kinds of the education, comparing especially to the other countries. And Ukraine has one of the highest literacy rates comparing with the other states, and actually, if you see the dynamics of the literacy rates, it's reaching almost 100%, and it was increased starting from the 90s, having like a little bit near 99%, and now almost 99.9 and something in 2017. So literacy rate is one of the highest and the toppest. And actually, 90% of children go to the secondary school. That is pretty high comparing to the other world. And 70% of Ukrainians have either secondary or higher education. And overall country ranks fourth on the World Bank Enrollment Index if you take the tertiary education. And according to the universities 21, a global association of the research universities, Ukraine is also ranked pretty high, having 38 position out of nearly 60 countries in the 2018 rankings of the national educational system. And we have such really good conditions to actually to provide this literacy and to provide very to provide the high skills for the educational workplace. And this high literacy rate is what we have basically because of the Soviet Union's emphasis on the total access to education for everyone, for every citizen. And this idea that education, secondary and higher education is actually an obligation for everyone is continued to be today. The only difference is that in the system of the higher education, it's not an obligation anymore, but this is a natural right for Ukrainian citizens to get the state-funded higher education. But secondary is obligatory for everyone. And that makes Ukraine actually one of the highest in terms of the levels, at least, of the educated workplace. However, as we may see and as we will see, it doesn't transfer into the rapid economical development and the workplace and the skillful working citizens. That there is a big question of the quality of education that is provided. However, talking about the Ukrainian education, we should take into consideration that despite this data and these indexes that show really good performances, one of the biggest problems is actually in the quality of education. And these problems in the quality of education were accumulating since probably the early 90s and are connected with the competitives of knowledge and the competitives of skills that are gained and that can work in the real economy. So Ukrainian economic crisis in 90s led to great extent the decline in financing of the education, including specifically research and development. And also the economic situation has a tremendous negative impact overall, not only in financing of education, but also of creating jobs and preparing people for these jobs. And also it led to the mass migration of the educated people. Well, overall, Ukraine is doing like pretty good comparing with the states of the low middle income and even in the world in financing of the education, take into account the recommended 6% of the GDP. But if we see the national economy, 50% of it is hidden in the shade. So we can see that this percentage is not really so high, taking into account the actual money that is spent for education. Also, Ukraine, in terms of the state expenditures for education, we can see that we are doing a little bit lesser than world in general. So only like spending 12% in 2016. I think in 2020 it was around 10%. And these costs were also cut because of the coronavirus cuttings, budgetary cuttings that we face. So actually, these factors of the economic decline and the troubles that Ukrainian government faced with inability to finance directly education and bring necessary skills to the market caused the tremendous migration of the educated people. So there is a really good research that I recommend you to read, was by Bahito and Koop. And you can see here that actually in 2005 and in 2008, the majority of the upper secondaries of the university skillful workers were trying to escape in different countries. And what is interesting here, this is the percentage of the post-secondary education. So the university, and especially the territory, so the university educated people that mainly go to the Western Europe. While to the neighboring states, the usually people after the graduation of school were moving there. And if you see how the situation changed in a few years, so actually I don't say updates of this research, but at least in this perspective, you can see that Western Europe and the United States actually get the majority of the educated people. And this is pretty interesting in case that actually education and the possibility to find a work works perfectly as this pull and push factor for migration. But to some greater extent, this is one of the tragedies that the people that were educated enough and the states paid a lot of money that actually go somewhere abroad for to find their working possibilities. Yeah. So what is the people perception about the education? Because usually this is one of the myth that education is Ukraine is still challenged and under the question. So there was a big demographic initiatives foundation survey that was done in 2016, and I haven't seen the updates since that time directly on this education. But actually, that was a big questionnaire that showed that people agree or disagree with this position. We can see that people almost do not consider for education, and especially higher education, to be good enough to offer opportunities to find a decent job. So you can see that 56% of people disagree. And also people disagree that higher education gives unequal opportunities to study in the universities. Well, quite interesting fact that also one third of people agree, and the same account disagree, that their children should go abroad to study for their education. And I recently see the data on this fact, and it's still the same. So one third of country agree, and one third of country disagree that people should go abroad for the education. Well, this research was also interested because of the mentioning some people perceptions about the problems and some of the positive trends. So you can see that there are top 4 probably main problems that people consider to be important in terms of the education. So corruption among faculty on the different levels. 37 of people actually surveyed mentioned this as one of the priorities. Then non-recognition of diplomas of Ukraine in the world, and his is the higher educational institution, and the divergence of the higher education from the demands of the labor market, and also poor infrastructure and facilities of the higher education institution. What is interesting, the different surveys, it was rather complex, but recent surveys showed that the corruption factor was dramatically going down, and this is one of the results of reforms that were taken by Ukrainian government since 2014. Well, we have also the positive features that people who were surveyed admitted. So they believe that education provides a solid professional knowledge and also provides solid ideological knowledge that I do believe is simply the possibility to understand the world and your place in this world. What is also interesting that people mentioned the priority measures that should be taken into account to improve the quality of education, specifically higher education. It's fight against the corruption and dishonesty, then stimulating academic activity in the higher schools to avoid these gaps between schooling and university life, then raising teachers' salaries to make this profession more prestigious, establishing cooperation with the best universities in world in terms of different research possibilities and also joint educational programs, and greater connections of teaching with the requirements of the future professions. That indeed is a challenge, taken into account not only the present conditions but also the rapid change of the labor market and the profession required that we see in the recent years. So why I mentioned this Democratic Initiative Foundation research, because basically it shows the major trends and the major ideas that a Ministry of Higher Education was taking into account and trying to make the reform of education overall and higher education in specifically. So as I told, the reform started in 2014, mainly after the Revolution of Dignity, and probably together with the reform of police service, and the educational reform was considered to be one of the most important and one of the most visible reforms. While the police service reform was considered to be really fast and people can see it, the educational reform was considered to be held in the more longer perspective, like 10 years or more. So in 2014, the law on the higher education was adopted that actually gives a lot of autonomy to the universities. Then in 2017, the law on education was adopted that do an update for the whole educational system and put an emphasis on the each element of the structure of the higher education. What was also important that it deeply connects Ukrainian competencies and skills that pupils, students, or adults had to take as a result of the education of different levels and match them directly with the European. So because before that there were some differences, but now we are concretely moving with the full understanding of the European Bolognian, and not only Bolognian process, but overall the educational process. And in 2020, the law on the complete general secondary education was adopted, and it also opened the possibility to reform the secondary education and to create what is called in Ukraine the new school, the new Ukrainian school. Let's see deeply what does it mean. So in general, Ukraine is using the system that is used in many countries. The only difference is that we change according to these laws and these developments a little bit the years of schooling, and also the possibilities to move like individually within this educational system. So we have mainly the preschool education that lasts for 3 or 4 years. We have the elementary school that is 4 years right now. Then the secondary education that now is working like 7 years, and taking into account the elementary school. So pupils spend like almost 10 or 11 years in the school. But since 2027, it will be divided like into the exactly elementary school, then secondary general education of the first cycle or the first phase, and then we will have the secondary general education of the second phase that will last 2 years, or people can go to the vocational education to be trained there for 1.5 to almost 4 years. After that, we have this external independent testing, or in Ukrainian language we call it ZNO, and people can go to the higher education institutions with the bachelor degree that in Ukraine is 4 years, and only the law on higher education allowed to have this European style 3 years education. However, not all the universities actually transformed their systems, and there is a big debate actually in the educational sphere whether the bachelor should be 3 years or 4 years. So the majority of Ukrainian programs are still keeping this 4 years idea. Or, for example, people from vocational education can go to colleges, so to get the junior bachelor or the junior specialist, and to get to the integrated master's degree. Or, for example, if you finish bachelor, so you can simply go to the master's degree. Then you have naturally the doctoral of philosophy that lasts for 3 and 4 years, and that lets you to the postgraduate education of the doctor of science, and you continue your research or academic career. Well, all in this sphere. What was also interested by this law on education, the possibilities of formal and informal education were also introduced, and the possibilities of them to be incorporated into the formal education. So this is a system of the formal education. However, there is the very concrete path, and the new laws should be adopted like to allow this informal and formal education to be recognized as a part of the national agenda. What are the main problems in the Ukrainian education, according to surveys and according to the Ministry of Education, that made these problem studies as a part of their white papers and proposals to the reform of higher education? So there was a good and recent research in terms of the brief that was done by the Professor Bakrushin from the Zaporizhia University, who studied actually the evaluation of the reform of this first phase that was started in 2014 and ending in 2020. And together with the other experts, he admitted the inconsistency of legislation, the quality of education, outdated educational facilities, then demographic situation, especially the birth rate and migration issues, the finances of insufficient financial support for education. But the problem that the students are poorly prepared by schools to study in universities, and here we have the schooling gap that is created, and the global competition. That is basically the problem with the skills that people reach after each of the educational level, able to compete with the other nationals, with the other people from all over the world. So in terms of legislation, we should admit that development of the whole educational sphere is very dependent on the of the other trends, and with the other actually laws. So budgetary things, then tax codex, labor laws on the local administration, and so on and so forth. And the major problem is that despite we are moving and performing the changes in the education, and the really new laws within the educational sphere are adopted, however, in the number of cases, if we take the overall system, we can see that they are not corresponding. So the other laws are not corresponding to the recent developments in the educational sphere. That actually creates problems for their full implementation. And one of, for example, of the examples is that according to the law of the higher education, students have the right for the individual study, and they are moving, so the paths over the university should be done within the individual way. And that's, for example, the possibility to choose some of the elective courses, or like to stop the education for some period of time, and also to do it individually, so not to follow with the group in the university style. However, there is also law on army that that is not updated together with the education. And when you decide to stop your education, to take a break, for example, to spend your time wherever you wish, so usually here you are obliged to go to the for the service for Ukrainian army, because they don't see so they don't have updates in their laws, and that is why the majority of students can't afford like to take several gap years. So and this is one of the examples. Or, for example, the possibility to have the international scholars within the educational process. So now it is allowed for the international scholars to come and to teach in the universities. However, there should be a contract with them. And according to the national law, you can't have the international scholar, for example, working on the voluntary basis. And sometimes they don't want to come here and to sign contract. That simply means that they should open the visas, working visas, and this is very long procedure, and not always people just want to come and to work here, and not always Ukrainian universities are able to pay them. So this is tricky situation that they can only come to work. They should open visa, you should pay for this visa, you should also pay for the trade, for the working regulations, and that is how we are missing the possibility, and by we I mean overall Ukrainian situation, to bring, for example, international scholars, not for teach for some time, but for example, for a longer time, and to stay here on the voluntary basis, or so on and so forth. And also the recognition of formal and informal, actually of the non-formal and informal education in the system of the formal education. This simply means that all the certificates, different courses, photography, whatever you can have outside of the university, of the school, that you can bring inside of the university, and these credits should be recognized. So unfortunately, we do not also have the very clear procedures on the international, on the national level, how we can develop this this sphere. While universities, as gaining and having this autonomy, can actually do this. So this is a simple example, few of the very simple examples how you should think over the overall system, and by changing one laws, making like a big push in the one direction, you should always think about the other laws and other microsystems that are dependent on or they influenced your path. Quality of education is another huge challenge, and it's mainly about the content that is being taught, and that is sometimes outdated, and also poorly incorporates the recent technological developments. And actually the situation COVID show it that unfortunately not all the schools, both in the secondary education and the higher education, were able to be very flexible in terms of the adapting of the technological developments. Also inconsistent with up-to-date research that is also connected with the out-of-date of the knowledge and the studies that are presented. Then the deterioration of the quality of the pedagogical education due to the low motivation of the pupils who actually go to the pedagogy study there and then go to schools or go to universities as a young and qualified professionals, and motivate students and pupils to educate. And also low level of training of the entrants in the certain specialities, especially in the hard sciences, so in physics, mathematics, in computer science. And this is one also of the reasons why this gap between schooling and higher education is created. And usually in the first years of education in the universities, you're not moving forward, you're just trying to get what was missed in the school. And this is both because of motivation, but also because out of dateness of the some of the educational programs in the last years of the schooling. And then definitely cause the results on the students' performance, especially in testing and in the skills training. Once more, you can see that while overall Ukrainians are doing more than 80% of the gaining the minimum scales in testing, yes, both in math, in reading, in sciences, after the primary and the second education. Nevertheless, the share of students who are achieving the advanced results is not so high. It's almost like 12%. But the majority of the developed countries are going here. So they have both the high level of the minimum positive results, yes, and also the share of the students who are gaining the advanced results is also growing. So actually, literacy rate or accessibility to education is not helping too much to gain really qualified skills and knowledge after the finishing of the schools, and that directly influence the outcomes both in the development of the country and then actually the economic development, especially because after the graduation of the schools, you simply go to the market, and that is how you work in the market. So you can see that starting from the 2005, Ukraine was not moving like tremendously in 10 years, while for example the other countries, you can see the tremendous shift, especially of the highly developed countries. And we talk about them as an economic boomers, and we usually consider what should be done to do this economic boom. Actually, education is a part in the part of this story. So unfortunately, we do not have the increase both in terms of the quality of the results, but also in terms of the impact on the in economy. Well, we have this GDP per capita comparison. Demography. Not only bad quality or insufficient quality overall of education that could be actually changed, and the current reforms are trying to change this. But also the overall demographic situation is also putting an impact. And here you can see how different fields of education, policy making, economy, demography, job market is penetrating into each other's spheres, and that is why it makes so complex, this issue so complex. So yes, we talked that students are badly prepared for the universities because of this, and creating this schooling gap, and that actually cost for once more for universities not to continue, but actually to fill this gap with the previous knowledge, and one additional year is losing. There is why probably the majority of the Ukrainian universities, they have still this 4-year bachelor projects, because they need one additional year to fill the gap. And this also has not only the quality reason, but demographical reason. So number of schools graduates has decreased from almost 500,000 in 2004 and to 200,000 in 2016. Well, for example, the places that were reserved for them in the higher educational institutions, they stayed the same. And that's actually caused that the share of school graduates admitted into universities, and it was up to 80%. So that means automatically decrease of training activity. And the majority of people who wanted the higher education, they get the higher education. However, in the last 2 years, the number decreased to around almost 200,000. That is probably the 50% of a number of students that want to study after graduation of school. And that's a little bit, this is a good sign, because we measured these two markets of the proposition and of the need. And that was done also because of the decreasing a little bit in number of the universities. Before the 2014, there are almost 600 universities, if I'm not mistaken, in Ukraine. That was too much. Yeah, it was too much. And the majority of them, near like 500, were of the state ownership. So you can see how finances were spent for that. So this is also interesting point here, because we should think over our future, because according to the many research, and I'm quoting here the UN researches, the project that Ukrainian population will decrease almost in 18% until the 2050, mainly to the 32 million of people, officially 32 million of people. It also created a problem in terms of the expenditures for the higher education and to the secondary education that were made. It simply means that we will not need so many teachers, we will not need so many facilities, we will not need so many universities or schools if it just keep moving with what we have right now. The other problem is the demographical sphere is that external examination on SNO in Ukrainian demonstrate the difference between the results from children from cities and villages. So usually in cities, children have the better possibility to pass SNO with real good results. And it also has a very clear connection between the level of the family income. So this is also the question of inequality. And there was a very good research of the SADOS think tank. I think it's pretty old. That is why I not show it here. It was for 2016, but it showed actually that the more the families with the higher income usually invest into the students, into the children, and they have more possibilities to have the paid access to tutored and to gain better educational activities and actually to pass SNO. While, for example, the students with the low, medium, or low income, they're not performing badly. So they have the same chances, but unfortunately, their share in the general group of students with the higher rate, with the higher results, is not so big. So that simply means that if they have good teachers, if they have good schools, that means that they will do their job greatly and have better results. If not, this like sentence or proposals that if children want, they will study better, it's not working. It's not working because if you have bad conditions in schools with bad teachers and you don't have extra money to have the tutor access, we will not pass your test greatly. Unfortunately, here also lays the question of the inequality as in other social spheres. And the final step is also the disproportion of the need. So that is usually the question of the choice. So what people choose to go and where they choose to go. So we have the disproportion in majors, and it's up to 80% of students studying in the popular majors like law, like economy, like management, now computer science, and they are paying tuition fees there. So it's not on the state budget, they're paying for that. So here, please, you can see in 2020, this is the top majors or the top concentrations where people were going. So it was law, management, you see the philosophy, computer science, pedagogy, then economy, programming, finances, psychology, and marketing. And this creates almost 80% of the choice. Well, 20% for all other disciplines. It's not state funded here, so it's general, both state funded and private. But that is interesting that state is not putting here too much cost, for example, for law management, so they don't need it on the budget places. However, people are ready to pay for themselves. What is also interesting here that we, in terms of the demography, we have the question of mobility. And it's working in that way, sorry for Ukrainian, that this is a share of the students who go to their own region. And they are on the state budget. And here, this is a share that goes to their own region, but they're paying for education. So they're on the contract, as it's called in Ukraine. And you can see that Kyiv city, then Kharkiv region, Lviv region, Odessa region, Chernivtsi, more than 80% of students actually stay there. So overall, we do not have the too much Ukrainian mobility of students who are going from one region to another. And especially it is seen by the contract, while once more, Kharkiv region, Kyiv city, Lviv region, Odessa region, Chernivtsi, and Dnipropetrovsk are the main centers within the geographical map of Ukraine, where students of these areas from these regions stay at home. So while in other cases, the students from the other regions are trying to get to these zones. And this is both good and bad. So good because there is a demand, and you have a good centers, educational centers, I mean cities and regions. But what is bad that actually we do not have these shiftings, and we don't have this overall mobility in different regions. So, for example, students from Kyiv or from Lviv region are not going to the other parts of Ukraine, and then simply means that we have in proportion in the number of students that that is affecting the development and of the regional, so-called regional universities. You can see that in the majority of the cases in 2018, sorry for Ukrainian once more, so the students are going to Kyiv, and from Chernihiv Oblast, from Cherkasy, from Zhytomyr, from Sumy, from Poltava, and you have tremendous increase in Kyiv from the citizens of these cities, while from Lviv Oblast or Lviv region is gathering students from the western part of Ukraine, and Kharkiv Oblast is doing the same for actually the eastern part of Ukraine and northern part of Ukraine. And there is a big question. So what should the regional universities do, as the state system of the financing and the state system of education is working? If the schools, if the regional schools produce this, the amount of the students, and these regional universities expecting them to come, and they all are going somewhere to the cities of Kyiv, to Lviv, Kharkiv, or Odessa, and there are not so many budget places there, and the students are paying there, and there is overlapping the regional economy of these cities. So, and people are investing too much there. State is cutting the places in their regional home universities, and here we see the negative effect of this over mobility. But from the other point of view, that also creates the different centers and localizations in the most popular regions, and that simply means that that children, they don't see Ukraine, overall Ukraine, and there is also the creation of some of the stereotypes and too much localization inside of the region. That is also paying the negative effects to the future consideration and the unity of the country. Yeah. So international mobility. What is interesting that here, if we compare the data, so there is some of the political myth that a lot of Ukrainians are going abroad and study abroad. This is actually one of the interesting questions, because it depends actually what of your ideology. If you are more like neoliberal, you can think that it's good because people are penetrating to the other societies, gaining education there, they can come back here and study here well. If you are more conservative in that sense, you can definitely see that your country is losing the bright minds. What is interesting here that if we chart, if you see the numbers, you will see that this is not quite true, because approximately the same amount of people, of students who are going abroad for a study is pretty the same that Ukraine have each year while the international students are coming here to Ukraine. So overall, according to the CEDOS think tank research, in 2017-18, almost 83,000 of Ukrainian students were studying abroad. So I haven't seen the more recent updates on the data, so I just show you that. But it was practically the same of the 2018-19. And it decreased a little bit in this year because of the coronavirus. While you can see the structure of the countries, and you can see that the majority of students are going to Poland, and this is quite right. So the tremendous population, number of students population is actually going to Poland, and is going up and up each year. Well, this question about the bright minds that are going abroad, actually the short answer is no. According to this CEDOS research, and you can see it, only 25% of the students who have the best results in the um, after school evaluation, so in this NO, are going somewhere abroad. So it's pretty high, 21%, 1/4, but actually it's not so high as people might think it's this be. What is interesting is that in the recent years, especially after 2014, the number of students who are going abroad to Poland, to Germany, to other European states is increasing, while, for example, students who are studying in Russia is decreasing, because Russia was used to be a place where Ukrainian students, especially from the eastern part of Ukraine, were going before 2014. And what is also interesting, so here there is only 1 year, but we also have a very slight increase in number of students who are going to Canada, USA, and Australia and gain education there. So look at the numbers, almost 83,000 of students, at least in 2018 and 17 and 18. And here we have almost the same number of people who are coming to study in Ukraine, and they are also changing the student profile of the profile of students. So according to the study in Ukraine, there is a website for the National Office for International Studies in Ukraine. We have like this very slight but decrease in the number of the international students. And if you see the picture, overall, you can see that the majority are going to the bachelor and master degrees. So there is some percentage of people who are going to the preparatory courses, and not so many people. It was data for 2018, I think. Only almost 3,000 of people are staying for the higher education. And if you see it by groups, the majority are coming from India. Then you see Morocco, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Nigeria, and the other markets. So part of these mobilities are because of the intergovernmental exchanges, and so this means that simply there are budget there. For example, Chinese are paying a lot, and you know the Chinese are paying a lot for everyone. But also we can see that the majority of cases here are the computer science and medical concentrations. So people are coming here to gain this education because it's considered to be better here, even with a worse of facilities, but better level of education, of professional education, than in their own countries. What is interesting here, the Nigerian students are starting to increase, and it's believed that in the next 10 years, their number will increase dramatically because of the social boom with the birth in Nigeria. Yeah. So why they are coming to Ukraine, and mainly for studies? So why not the percentage of the postgraduate education? So I mean the PhD studies is so high. It's actually once more the case with the quality and research, especially of the education. I told you at the beginning that unfortunately with the lowering of the cost in the economy, it's almost really difficult to invest a lot into the research and in development. And you can see by the multi-rank questionnaire that is going each year that in the it's worldwide questionnaire about the education, the quality of education. You can see that the majority of students that actually are part of this multi-rank evaluation, they admit that Ukraine is good as teaching and learning, not so good in research and in knowledge transfer. That is a trouble because it directly influences the economy. So there is always also troubles with the international orientation. So here the concept of the global education that we're discussing is not so present in the curriculums of the programs, but it's really good with the regional engagement. So this regional studies inside of the Ukraine. So and it directly reflects the situation why the international students are coming for bachelor and master degrees usually, and why are not staying longer for doing their doctoral degrees. And that affects actually these both such situation also affects the competencies. So how we can compete globally, you can see the real two troubles. That means the knowledge transfer, research, and international orientation, and that directly influence our competencies within the global scale. So according to the Global Competencies Index, where education and skills is one part of it, the others are regulations, economy, life, and infrastructure, and so on and so forth. Ukraine is only 85th. Out of 130 something countries. And you can see that directly this line within the good quality, good access to education, and the professional skills that are given here that people consider to be actually is not coming to the competences that the students gain, and not only knowledge but actually competences that students gained after the education. So this is one of the troubles of the transferring of knowledge that should be very separately and is actually pointed out within the reforms in the at least higher education. And we know with you that take into account different researches, and we can see by this one that was done for more than 40 years, competencies matter. So not only access, not only financing, not only numbers, but actually the quality. The quality and skills matters. So the deep study matters, because one score of PISA test is equal to the 2% of the GDP per capita growth. And here lies one more problem in the sphere of education, that actually we do not have too much data to evaluate and to use. So any think tank is Ukraine that is working in the educational field and producing this data is very popular. That is why I am more quoting Sirius, for example, think tank, than the Ministry of Education. And this is one of the challenges that actually we should pay attention here. So one more. In terms of the PISA, so this is average score of math, science, and reading. So we are in the group that that has, like, in the middle group of that. But however, these results are not good enough to be transferred in the economy, in the workplaces. So this is a big challenge for the out-of-dateness and the professional concentration of education, not only theoretical one that we have here. And also finance and education is also a big challenge. You saw that we are almost having 6% of the GDP that is overall world recommendation, but according to the law on education, we have the requirement of the 7% of GDP that should be spent for education. However, this percentage depends on the, sorry for mistake here, for GDP growth. That simply means if we are declining in terms of the GDP growth, so the government had the right not to have this 7%, not to pay the 7%, and that's directly what happened this year. So for 2020, actually 140 billion of UA hryvnias were spent for education, and this is almost 10% of the overall Ukrainian budget. That is, and this exactly is exactly 5 billion of US dollars. And it's planned to increase slightly for the next years, and almost to 6 billion of the US dollars. However, COVID cuts almost 10% of this budget. And the majority of costs were cut actually for the infrastructural developments, and also for the for the investments into the scholarships for excellency, as far as I remember. The majority of these costs are spent for the funding salaries. And this is also one tragedy of Ukrainian budget, that it's consuming a lot, because with this huge number of the institutions and of teachers that are present. And you can see that almost 94 billion of UA hryvnias are spent for the secondary education, and only 91 million of Ukrainian hryvnias are spent for the higher education. And almost 1 billion of Ukrainian hryvnias were spent this year for infrastructure. However, it was cut almost by the 90% because of the COVID cuts, but still these costs are reserved, and we can use it until the end of this years. And that is dramatic, because actually the out-of-date infrastructure in the many of the schools, especially in the village schools, is still a big question, and also for the universities. So what should be noted here, that universities, that state-owned universities, are funded by the budget directly. And one of the changes of the law of the higher education is that now the new system will be introduced, because before that there were calculations of the number of people from the region, and there were calculations of the number of students that were educated last year, and so the costs for the higher institutions were paid directly by these calculations. But now money are going with, so they're using the formula that money are going with the students. That means that the more students you have in university for your programs, the more money you will get. And if you have not many students, they simply mean that you will not get the cost, and you can't open new programs or have the existing programs. And it is believed that it will increase a little bit competencies within the institutions. But the majority of the school education is now not paid directly from the Ministry of Education. It was, but is not paying directly right now. So these costs are going to the local governments, and local governments are paying because are having these schools on their own budget and are paying directly from their own budget. And also the problem here is that unfortunately not all regions and not local authorities are good in with their budgets. So sometimes schools indeed they face the inability to get the necessary expenditures for actually to have the necessary cost to have their own expenditures covered. And in this field, there is still the troubles in terms of the regulation. And but nevertheless, Ministry of Education and Science is given this money at the concession. So that means directly that they're giving subsidies to the local governments, so they can have enough costs to pay for the schools. So overall, Ukraine spends about 23,000 of Ukrainian hryvnias per child, per pupil in the secondary school. That is almost $800 of US dollars. And these are this is in general because the majority of costs are spent per students. So in village, schools receive more than in the city. So, and I think that almost 32,000 of Ukrainian hryvnias are paid for per pupil in the village school, and almost, if I'm not mistaken, 19,000 of Ukrainian hryvnias are paid for a city. And the difference is because of the infrastructure. So this is not direct costs for the for salaries of teachers, but also for the infrastructure, and in villages it should be updated. And there are almost 4 million of children in the schools, so you can see why this budget was so high. Yes, almost 92 billion of in terms of the structure. So yeah, it's almost like 60% or even 70% of that. While for the higher education, we spend a little bit more, so it's almost 46,000 of Ukrainian hryvnias. That is 1,600 of US dollars, and they are not also spending directly. So it depends on the number of students and on the universities. But what is interesting here, that the most expensive education in terms of the higher education is actually musical academies and arts. So in general, it depends on the school, but sometimes there is statistically at least sometimes more than 1,000 of 100,000 of Ukrainian hryvnias are spent for one student in the musical academies. There are almost 350,000 of students that take scholarships, and we in Ukraine we call it like on the budget, and almost out of 680,000 of students overall. So it's probably like 50% of students, 51% of students is getting scholarship from the state, while other 49% are paying for their higher education. And as we see by the chart of the students' mobility, Kyiv city, Kharkiv region, Lviv region, Odessa region, and Dnipropetrovsk region are the main places for main educational centers, and they gain 60% of the students who are on this country budget, and overall they gained the majority of the students that are placed in this city. So in the financial sphere, we also have here a little bit by the disproportion of the fundings. And what is interesting here, at least comparing the data, comparing to the higher education in the other countries, so we can see that in the United States, almost 11,000 of the US dollars are spent by these state-owned universities for students. So in Russia, it's almost 3,000 and 8,000 of US dollars. And then you see Latvia and Estonia, Czech Republic, 6,000 and 6,500 in Poland. So we have a difference in Ukraine with Poland almost in five times how the country spent for the students in this field. Yeah, so these are the main challenges. Definitely there are many others, and while this considered to be the most important that actually need to be followed, need to be observed, and they are the part of logic of the reforms, of the present reforms within the Ministry of Education. However, education is important, and as we talked, this is one of the 17th Sustainable Development Goals, and that Ukraine and other countries take to fulfill until the 2030. And you can see that in the Ukrainian scale, so we have very clear data what we want to achieve. And here you can see that right now we have problems with the access to the primary education for the children, while we were planning for 2030 have 95% of the all children going to the pre-primary education, so to the kindergartens. Unfortunately, no. We had in 2018 only almost 70%, and I think we have pretty the same in 2019. That simply shows that we can't get its goal. And the problem here is both because it's also an infrastructural problem. You may probably know that in the majority even of the new buildings and that are built in the cities, kindergartens unfortunately are not so plan to build. So, and this is a regulatory issue, but it's still important because this is a primarily step towards the socialization of the children. So you also see that we have troubles here in the level of participation of the population in formal and informal of education and vocational training. So that simply means that that in terms of the training of the skills that are required to get the jobs and to get either jobs or start entrepreneurship projects. So it's not on, it's always also a challenge. Yeah, and also the gender issue. While the majority of the cases we have, especially in the secondary school, women who are present, and we were planning to have almost 25% of men to be engaged in the secondary education, while we only have 13%, and we will not meet this challenge. And that is deeply connected, not because of the behavior of men, but actually with the question of salaries. It's not gender equal in the terms, because men usually go to the other spheres, like to get more higher salaries for the family, and this is a tragic thing, also in terms of the gender equality. While we have increase in terms of the access to the rural areas, to the rural schools, and also we have increased a number of the possibilities for inclusive education, and this is a rapid changes that are happening right now. So one of the reforms was actually pushed towards the inclusive education. But also there is a slight challenge with the internet access, and you probably all know right now how troubles with the internet access we may face. So overall, we can see that, take into account the SDG goals that Ukraine take for itself, in terms of the higher education, we are not moving so badly, while there are a few challenges in terms of the professional training, this tragedy in terms of the pre-school education, and also in terms of the gender equality, and the prices, costs that are paid for school teachers is still a challengeable, and we will probably not meet here what we have planned. So what is planned generally to do with this field? As I told, the new reforms started in 2014. They will be long-term reforms. They'll not be in 5 or 10 years. The majority of reforms are planned until the 2030, so there are more than 10 years to implement them. The first what is needed is actually to finish reform on the secondary education. That is a basis. There is a basis because it's almost 10 years. This is a basic education, and this education is actually obligatory for everyone in terms of the Ukrainian constitution. So currently we are on the 5th year of changing. I mean, it's fifth year of studying. So the year by year they're changing the approaches to the each year of study. So more 5 years I need to come, and you remember that in 2027 we will have the separation of the higher level of the secondary education and concentration in the vocational education in this field. So also to improve the concept of preschool education, and developed this field, like also to fulfill the SDG strategy and our strategy. To adopt the national strategy of inclusive educational development for 2020 and 2030, because the previous one was until the 2020, and you see that we have good performances, actually good KPIs, good result in that, but the new strategy should be passed. Practical oriented education. This is one of the challenges because according to the different data that we discussed with you, we are failing tremendously in this field of the practical orientation of education, and also having the popularity of the vocational education. And that was considered to be fixed with the so-called dual education approach, while you can work within the specific projects in industry, and you will have the mentors from both from the educational side, from the institutions, but also from industry. And you actually learning by doing so, using learning by doing approach and gaining the necessary skills on the concrete situations that that you will have as the credit recognized in your own institutions. However, this dual education reform was planned to be started in 2020, and it will be postponed. However, in terms of the higher education, it is one of the essential part of that. Then the complete reform on the vocational and technical education system, to adopt the law on the vocational education and to promote the importance of the vocational education. So not all people go to lawyers or to finances or to management. Then it is important to optimize and to do the optimization of the educational network. There are almost 350 universities left in Ukraine, out of 600 and more before the 2014, and we see with the demographic changes there is still questions how many should be, how many should receive, how many money should state spend to support institutions, regional institutions, while the students and people are going somewhere to the other regions. That is a question here is with the rural schools. While only 33% of the children study in the rural schools, the number of them is the highest. So there are almost 67% of the rural schools in Ukraine. So, and here the education, the secondary school education was passed. So at least in the elementary schools, they kept the number of the elementary schools in the small villages, while then going to the secondary education, students will have to go to the other villages. So they will concentrate the schooling in and make it more optimized, because there is no need, for example, for the many of schools to be opened if there are only 2 or 3 people are present there. But they gather students from different villages, let's say in the community or in the region, and then school can adequately operate with the huge number of students. That means that they will get more money. That means that you can work with your resources more properly, but that also means that you should invest a lot into the infrastructure to make it possible to get from one village to the other village where the school is located easily. Then finances on the local level for communal educational institutions. So this is the trick of the subsidies that is spent to the by government, national government, to the local governments to budget. And the problem is that there is also the calculation scheme there. However, there is no clear reservation of costs in the budget, as we see on the national level. This 7% there is reserved by law. In national budget, they don't have it, and this should be done to be sure that some of course are reserved for this purpose, and also allow the public-private partnership to co-finance schools, to open schools. So it started in the recent years, such possibility, but once more, it's not widespread enough. Also, the salary structure should be redesigned to give the possibility, exactly, for example, for Ministry of Education to give the motivation scholarships and to give the motivation schools for courses that are performing better, to motivate young teachers especially in the secondary school, to have higher salaries and to go to the schooling system, not to go to the other spheres of markets, because we need skillful teachers to have good results of students. Then develop the research and innovation infrastructure by the direct costs. So to have, once more, the reservation costs in the budget, they will directly go to the innovation and research infrastructure in the universities, but also in the secondary education. And introduce a mechanism for co-financing and the creation of high-tech industries with the participation of the both higher educational institution and research institution. Such mechanisms are already made, but however, we do not have the overall state regulations in this field. So there is no laws or like procedures that will enable to do it easily, and there is no state support in this field. But usually this is an idea of public-private partnerships when state is taking the responsibility for the on the political level, yes, to give assurances for business that their negotiations and their ideals will be working properly. So these are the recent plans of the Ministry of Education and Science that will be held in the next few years. Are these steps enough to change the overall situation in Ukraine with the education? What else should be done? Let's talk about it on a class. But now, thank you for your attention. There is additional literature that you may be interested to read to clarify and specify more on data. And see you in the class.